Hi, my name is Rick Panizza, and this is a poem reading about and dedicated to, the homeless. But before I read the poem, let me start off with an anecdote about a man of which I met just last evening. First of all, a little background about the homeless, of which he indeed was. Most of the homeless population in America are not, and I repeat, are not mentally ill. And most of the homeless population don't have to be poor, destitute, and, homeless. Regardless of all the political rhetoric and rancor that goes on today and what you read and hear in the news, the era of Trump and other matters of the sort, we indeed have a very, very liberal and generous federal government in terms of offering many services to the homeless, the destitute, as well as the poor, which entails housing through vouchers, disability, other means of acquiring finances, social services, for assistance in terms of finding work, if you're capable of working, all kinds of services that are indeed offered vis-a-vis just the federal government alone, but also services upon that by various states as well, for those who of which are homeless and destitute, etc. 99.99% of the time, when you run into someone who of which is panhandling, in other words, begging for money, it is usually for drugs and or alcohol. And by giving money to them, you're simply feeding the addiction, their addiction, to drugs and or, alcohol. That is it. There is, of course, albeit a minority of the homeless population, those who of which are mentally ill and do not have the wherewithal in order to acquire all the services and amenities that the government indeed has to offer. My sympathy goes out to them, but they need medical attention more than they need money. For mental illness is a medical issue that ought to be addressed. And once again, there are free services offered by the federal government to supply medications to those who of which are mentally ill, regardless of whether or not they have the wherewithal to seek out those services. They are out there, indeed. Most of the time, again, those who panhandle are doing so to feed their drug addiction or other nefarious reasons, unfortunately. But then there's the rare exception, 1/10 of 1% of the time, when you run into an individual who of which is homeless, truly destitute, and poor, and is the real McCoy of someone who is homeless, destitute, and, poor. Last night, I ran into one of these individuals, the real thing, the real McCoy, as it were, as I've stated before. At any rate, he was a man in about his mid-50s, who of which lost his apartment due to an ending of the moratorium upon rent that was put into place to help those in need financially to keep their homes during the era of COVID-19. Now that COVID-19 is mostly curtailed through most people having had indeed been vaccinated, The moratorium is lifting in some states, not totally throughout all the nation, but in some states and some municipalities as well. The moratorium is no longer the rule of the law, forcing those which are not employed for whatever reason, literally out in the streets. That was this individual's story. He could no longer pay for rent, and he was, well, subsequently evicted. He had no drug or alcohol issues or problems whatsoever, and his faculties, yes, were perfectly intact. He had a 7-year-old granddaughter, not with him at the time, but one which he talked about very much because he loved her very much indeed, and was concerned about her welfare as well as his own. He didn't hit me up for money, which is one of the reasons, one of the signals, I ought to say, why he was indeed the real thing, and not just another scammer or faker or druggie or alcoholic looking for the next fix, but someone who truly was destitute and poor. He didn't need food, for he had a sandwich in his hand. He didn't need water, something to drink, for he had 2 bottles of cold water. All he wanted to do, all he asked for, was to listen. To listen to his circumstances. To listen about the story of his dire plight. So I did just that. He was just fed up of being homeless and out on the streets and having to deal with all the crime, the drugs, the destitution, the loneliness and the pain, not to mention the frustration of not having a home, and his personal circumstances as well. He told the story about his eviction. He told the story of how he can't find housing because he can't do without payment vis-a-vis rent for additional housing. He does have a job acquired at Briggs & Stratton with the company formerly thereof, rather. So he is partially employed, but can't quite make it to work because, well, he has literally no place to sleep. And he is physically, and you could see it too, absolutely, totally worn out and tired, just physically fatigued to death from walking the streets endlessly, aimlessly, just hoping, wishing, praying to God that the circumstance that he thought could never, ever happen to him would simply go away. At any rate, he told the story. I listened with a great amount of empathy, for he was, to say one last time, for real. And that's all he wanted. That's all that he wanted. Someone to hear him out. To hear about the frustrations, and the ugliness, the pain, and destitution of being relegated, not due to poor behavior, not due to issues related to drugs and or alcohol, or mental illness even, unfortunately, but due to circumstances that were literally literally beyond his control. It does happen to some people. As a matter of fact, essentially, we are all prone to become just like that man. Because he never asked for money, I never gave him any. He really wasn't interested in finances. He really wasn't interested in a mere handout. So we talked. He got out his grievances, his frustration, his pains, and utter disdain for the destitution, that of which he was definitely in. After about a half hour or so doing that, he thanked me very much for listening. I gave him some advice in terms of finding a bed, at least a place to sleep, which would be the Salvation Army or the Milwaukee Rescue Mission, which it is commonly referred to. Not the best living accommodations in the world, but at least you get a bed, and you get, well, the economy of a meal. Most importantly, you don't have to walk aimlessly and don't have to face the dangers of living out in the streets. So I gave them information about various temporary housing options vis-a-vis shelters, and various local places around the east side of Milwaukee that are accepting and that was willing to accommodate those who are homeless, at least to a certain extent. So he could have some option other than sleeping underneath a bridge or on a grocery store's parking lot, which indeed is what he was doing. Now hopefully he sought out those services in terms of shelter to at least get off the streets. Regarding what he will be able to do in terms of finances, I told him, look up, keep the faith. There are services, there are various entities and organizations out there that not only can, but will indeed help you. You're not alone in this, in other words. He thanked me very much just for listening, which indeed is all that he needed, all that he desired. And I thank him very much for entrusting me to listen to his story, to listen about his plight and also destitution, and why it all so tragically came about. He then turned around, walked in the opposite direction, to hit the streets once more. It was rather late at night, so his destination was underneath the bridge to sleep for the evening, or a parking lot, or a park, someplace that is at least relatively safe and free from danger of those who are out to do harm and take advantage of those most vulnerable, which would indeed be the homeless population. I'm confident by the sheer will and tenacity of this individual having the courage and strength to tell me his story, which for one final time is all that he desired. I'm confident that all will eventually turn out to be okay for him. At least, well, that is the hope. At any rate, this poetry reading is dedicated, well, to him. It's titled, Emptied Are the Souls, in dedication to the homeless. It reads, I recoil restless in random existence as one who is timid and weary. I stand shocked and all but stunned in the nighttime's gloom. The echoes run to the rapacious end and ruin. Empty are the souls of lonely renaissance that simply decay through the vanquished plain, never again to receive your wanted touch. It is the most imprisoned, indigent, sequestered, the most inhuman in vain. So trapped are the lonely in grief's utter death, never to hear the most sound of the most coveted whispered breath, a breath of redemptive solace that once was. Convicted within such a rapture and truth, of which now is gone and rendered empty, in love so vanquished, irresolvable, and through. Now see what you've gone and done. Is it merely them, or can it be you? Good day, and always remember, no matter how dire your circumstances may indeed become, please always do keep